Bonjour, enchanté.
Stéphane.
Bonjour,
Bonjour,
Stéphane.
Allô,
Enchanté.
Bonjour.
Bonjour, Noah.
Bonjour, Steven.
Bonjour, Noah.
Bonjour et bienvenue au interactif. Préférez-vous les instructions en français? Do you prefer the instructions in English? English. Each team has 10 minutes to present its case to the judges. For the sake of fairness, I will indicate the time with these. So when there's 10 minutes left, 5 minutes, 2 minutes, 3 seconds, and the last 10 seconds on my fingers. A period of question of a maximum duration of 10 minutes is assigned to the jury at the end of the presentation. I would like to remind the jury that it's mandatory to ask at least one question during this period. Please note that you cannot reveal the name or city of your university, as you may be disqualified. I would like to ask the public to turn off their cell phones. I will now invite the judges to introduce themselves. Et maintenant, laissez les juges se présenter et ensuite vous pourrez débuter la présentation.
Good morning, my name is Nathalie Buisson. I'm Senior Marketing Advisor at Health Canada and I work on the cannabis file.
Hi, my name is Stephen Goulet. I work for Procter & Gamble Canada in the trade marketing department for the hair care category. Head and Shoulders and Herbal are the brands I work on.
Hi, my name is Rodrigo Arambide. I'm a management consultant at PricewaterhouseCoopers and I work in our operation practice.
Hi, my name is Xavier Khan. I'm working as a product manager, digital content for Bell Media.
Thank you. Are everyone ready? Oh, sorry, you can go. All right.
Around the time of legalization, I had a conversation with my friends. Well, it seemed like we had a lot of questions and not a lot of answers, so I looked elsewhere. I talked to my dad, and it felt more like a lecture than, an engaging conversation among equals, to be honest. And with that said, that presents to us the challenge today. You need to interact with 18 to 24-year-olds in a way that's engaging, in a way where you can educate them and make it so that it's authentic. And that brings us to our strategy today.
Donc bonjour, mon nom c'est Ariane. Avec mes collègues Sarah, Noah et Esteban, on va vous présenter une stratégie pour Santé Canada. On va commencer par où Santé Canada est présentement dans ses initiatives par rapport à la légalisation du cannabis. On va ensuite passer à travers ce qu'on appelle le Decision Matrix. C'est nos critères de sélection pour la stratégie finale, dans le fond. Vous allez ensuite voir l'opportunité qui nous a été présentée, ce qu'on a décidé de faire avec les dossiers que Santé Canada nous a donnés. Et on va présenter notre stratégie qui s'appelle #DemandeAZizi ou AskDizi. On va finir sur une conclusion avec quelques petits points, puis on va ensuite vous laisser la parole pour les questions.
All right, so taking a look at the current situation, we first focus on the fact that the day of legalization was October 17th, 2018. Now at this time, why was it legalized? Well, the government of Canada wanted to regulate and restrict the sale of cannabis. And from there, we can see current advertisements are focused on fatal implications of impaired driving. Now, what we can also see is that the impression left on young adults is a little fatalist. With 40% of young adults believing the health risks of cannabis are low. And that's what we're here to address today, because as we can see, there's many medical risks here as well. And with that being said, we also want to look at the current ongoing and past campaigns from Health Canada. Specifically, in fall of 2017, we see the Don't Drive High campaign. So with this campaign, we saw a lot of cool, innovative, interactive features. We saw a lot of quizzes, we saw chatbots, and we even saw a lot of driving apps incorporated into the software. And we even see, and going on to a different campaign, we see Your Cannabis Questions Answered, Get the Honest Facts campaign. And that generated a lot of traction. So today, we combine these two campaigns and take it to the next level with a new campaign. And with that being said, we want to target a specific audience, and that being 18 to 24-year-olds. Because as we can see, a lot of marketers are appealing to this specific audience with interactivity, because that's how you educate them.
So the first thing we wanted to do is to we wanted to have decision criteria in order to find the best communication channel possible. So we obviously wanted to target 18 to 24-year-olds. We wanted to have a broad reach in order to get as many people educated. We also wanted to have a multi-platform strategy in order to be on several platforms and be able to reach people in their day-to-day life. We also wanted to have a budget of lower than $500,000 and a timeline that so that this project is ready to be rolled out in 6 months. And so the different communication channels that we looked at are social media, public transit, packaging, school workshops, and TV and radio. And if we just start at the bottom with school workshops, we see that not only would it be hard to target 18 to 24 years old, because students are a bit younger than that, but it would also be very expensive to go in all schools, and it would be very time consuming. If we go to the bottom, TV and radio, also very hard to target 18 to 24 years old, because it's such a broad range of people that look at that, and it's also very expensive and timely. So we decided to concentrate on 3 first. And the main problem is that it's not a multi-platform strategy, right? Except for social media where there's several platforms. And so what we decided to do is to combine all 3, and now we have a multi-platform strategy. And not only do we have a multi-platform strategy, with social we have digital, with public transit we have a public eye that's going to be able to look at this, and with packaging we're going to have a tangible object that people are going to be able to learn from. And this strategy is the Ask Didi campaign, or la campagne Ask Didi. Demande à Didi.
So, as Noah mentioned, the Ask Didi campaign comprises of 3 different pillars. The first would be revamping the conversation. This would include relaunching the Didi chatbot and promoting it through different social media channels. Next, we would provide the targeted packaging, and finally we would end with the public transport initiatives. So, beginning with the revamping of the conversation. So the current Didi was a chatbot that was released on Facebook Messenger during the Drive High campaign. And we thought that this was a very good initiative towards having more interaction with the target audience. It currently provided information and informational quizzes and ways to find rides for people who had smoked and who were high. However, we believe that it is important to expand the scope of Didi to larger discussions on health and cannabis, to actively engage 18 and 24-year-olds into conversations. So some of the improvements that we recommend would be to make Didi personable, make it the face of the campaign. It needs to become the mascot of what Health Canada is trying to achieve to communicate to 18 to 24-year-olds. Furthermore, the current Didi it was a very rudimental bot with buttons and menu options. We suggest that they move towards more open-ended questions, more conversational aspects, and contextual understanding. Finally, we want to encourage that even though it's designed to inform, it also reinforces messages that Health Canada is trying to promote. So if you look at the way the current sort of bot industry and how it's structured, there's different levels of sophistication in bots. The first would be menu and buttons, then to keyword recognition, then to contextual, each time increasing the quality of the user experience. So currently we found that Health Canada invested $40,000 Canadian in developing the bots. We recommend that to expand the scope, they invest an extra $80,000 to move up the bot to a more contextual understanding. This would allow for sort of better engagement of the user and also better trust of the tool. And we recommend that you continue using Banfield advertising for the campaign that you've been running.
So this is an example of a conversation that we would idealize as something that would appeal to truly an 18 to 24-year-old, somewhat millennial. As an example, the millennial could prompt Didi. Didi can also obviously prompt the users themselves, but in this case we used our colleague's face to prompt the bot. Didi then responds with some sort of generic message about how it can help the user. In this case, we had a question between differentiated CBD and THC, which are 2 components that fall into the cannabis industry. Didi answers with facts. Didi answers with something that is factual, it's true. In this case, we took the information from our interaction with Dr. Lamour that we had during our resolution time. It answers in several different little bubbles, right? To make it a little bit more interactive, a little bit more convenient, instead of the long messages that were being sent previously. It gives its answers in 2 parts, and this is really where we want to drive this home. The first part of the question is always the answer to what the user is doing. Not judgmental, just the answer, just the facts. In this case, truly what CBD versus THC is. And the second part is what we like to call the top spin. So it drives home the message from Health Canada without necessarily being patronizing, kind of like Sarah's dad. It emphasizes the potential health effects, and it's constantly in line with Health Canada's message. But Didi is only allowed to do this once it's answered the question of the user. The bot can also continue the conversation, as an example here, like the anything I can help you with, and the user can ask another question. Again, we see the top spin effect that we're talking about emphasized here, driving home Health Canada's cautionary message. All in all, DD's functions are increased greatly. We're keeping some of the original ones, but we're mainly increasing the ability of the bot to answer questions. We're also making sure it can inform people about different cannabis products down the line, not only being an informant tool, but also being able to provide some form of customer service. We also want to discuss the health risks of consuming cannabis, which we link directly to the top spin that we were mentioning previously, the Health Canada message, essentially. We'll be providing facts, statistics through interactive quizzes, and also the option to call a ride home and look at alternative modes of transport as a continuation of the Don't Drive High campaign. And finally, for data collection, we want to make sure that Health Canada is making the most out of using an interactive platform and a digital strategy. So we want to make sure that it's collecting the most popular questions that are being asked to DD, not only from a single user perspective to be able to tailor the recommendations and the cautionary advice that we're giving to the user, but also for Health Canada to be able to better target campaigns in the future.
So, while we think that the Ask DD bot is a good step towards an interactive platform for young people, we also need traction, and so this comes in the form of a social media campaign. So we've picked out here 2 influencers, but we have several other options as well that are tailored to different regions of Canada. So the first is Olivier Primo, owner of Beach Club, and Jesse Reyes, singer-songwriter, based in Toronto. And so the reason why we chose these influencers is because they're widely known individuals, they're career-driven and successful, they're in the target age grade, and they seem to be approachable. The way we would have them is through video of them interacting with the DD bot, asking different questions, and demonstrating different functional aspects of the DD bot. We would broadcast those through the influencers' social media platforms, but we would also run our own Facebook campaign with these videos, targeting 3 million 18 to 24-year-olds. 89% of people in that age demographic use Facebook, so that would be a very broad reach, and we would target around 10 views per person to really maximize the impression and the likelihood of people being aware of what DD is and wanting to use it.
So the second pillar of our strategy is the targeted packaging. And so what we first started by looking at, we wanted to look at the tobacco industry. So we did a case analysis. And we found that in 2009, in the US, there was the Family Smoking Prevention and Tobacco Control Act. And the goal here was to discourage minors and young adults from smoking, the same goal we have today with cannabis. And so this is why this case analysis is so interesting. And this case analysis was very successful, and there's 3 main strategies that they implemented. The first 2 is to control the product and limit advertising to young people. And as you already do this and you already have this in control at Santé Canada, we're not going to look at these strategies, but we want to look at warnings and labels and tobacco packaging. So we did a research and we looked at the effective, what differentiates labels on cigarette packages and what makes them efficient. And it's graphic, larger, and more comprehensive, and we decided to focus on larger and more comprehensive. And as we see today, in the present packaging, we see that there's a small label, but we want to make that much bigger. And if we base ourselves on the tobacco industry, there is a law that the warning sign must cover at least 50% of the area on the packaging. So we want to make it much bigger. We also want to make it much more comprehensive. We want to give the user more information, and more specifically, we want to add information on each single package, because right now there is only a very limited that has information related to 18 to 24-year-olds. So, for example, it says that adults under 25 are at greater risk of harm from cannabis, and this needs to be installed on every single package. We also want to put the Ask DD ou Demande à DD campaign, as well as the Don't Drive High campaign. Another important aspect is that doing this will enable you to target 100% of Canadians who buy cannabis legally, and it will be at negligible cost for Health Canada, because they won't be the ones changing the package. And also a very important aspect here that we'd like to touch upon is sustainability. Right now, if you buy 3.5 grams of cannabis, it comes in a big plastic container, and the plastic container is put in a cardboard box. It's really not eco-friendly, and there's much better ways of doing so, and we see potential alternatives that have already been approved by Santé Canada.
Right. And now for the third pillar of our strategy, specifically public transport initiatives. So why do we want to do this? Well, what we see is the 18 to 24 age group takes public transit 6 times a week. And what we wanted to focus on was subways and buses, specifically buses in Montreal, Toronto, Vancouver, Calgary, and Ottawa, and subways in Montreal and Toronto. So what do all these cities have in common? They are student hubs. So that's exactly where we want to target 18 to 24. And going on, what we'll see is that placements on buses will be a banner on the exterior. So from what you can see here, it's an extension of the Don't Drive High campaign that appeals not only to students in the area, but to other drivers on the road. And we also want to add the Ask Didi, because again, this is a resource to ask more questions. And that's exactly what we need to do here, start a conversation. And then moving on, what we can see, this would be an example of an interactive poster you'd see on the interior of the subway. And going on, just to get a little bit more detailed here, we actually were inspired by the Canada Food Guide when it came to creating a cannabis guide. So it outlines some of the many risks outlined on the Health Canada website, and we've integrated it into a visual that's both pleasing and a little nostalgic. A lot of the 18 to 24-year-olds in Canada went through the public school system and saw that food guide while in their class.
And so another important aspect to touch on is the budget. So, and more specifically, we don't want to exceed $500,000. Starting with social media, we looked at the additional bot investment of $80,000 as mentioned before, and we also considered influencer costs of $30,000, which include paying both the influencers as well as producing the video that's going to be published on social media. We also looked at advertising on Facebook, and we realized that to attain 3.4 million Canadians between the age of 18 and 24, it would cost $244,000. We also have a budget for public transportation. We have 50 buses across the 5 cities we've mentioned. We also have 60 subway carts in Montreal and Toronto. Given the average cost between these cities and the duration of 3 months of the advertising on both the buses on the subways, we arrive at a combined $114,000 budget for both bus and subway. And if we kind of look at the cost breakdown, we see that there's a majority on Facebook, but more specifically, the total cost of the Ask Didi campaign is of $467,000, lower than the $500,000 budget.
In terms of timeline, we want to make this fairly quick. As we've mentioned before, it's a 6-month timeline to release all of these projects on the road. So first up, we want to be able to talk to our original developers, maybe expanding their features, maybe collaborating with another firm as well. But we do want to remain with the same firm. Ideally, they've already worked on Didi. With that, in month 2, we want to start designing the public transport campaign, perhaps tailoring it to the advertising and to the colors of different buses in different cities. Montreal, as an example, blue and yellow. In month 3, we want to develop the video concept and contact the influencers to make sure that we're able to wrap that video by the end of the timeline. It's important to us that Didi by month 3 is mostly updated. That way we're able to film the video, and we have some buffer time there to also allot for any potential mishaps that would happen in the programming process. Finally, we want to finalize the public transport campaign and film Didi's campaign in month 4 to release everything in month 5 and 6 using nationwide press conferences, using social media, using the influencers' social media as well, and releasing Didi to the public widespread. This brings us to our key takeaways. We had 2 goals mandated by Health Canada, and to us it was extremely important to reach both of these. The first one was to establish a communication channel. We did this through a multi-platform approach, as we've mentioned previously. The first part was social media. We want to educate the consumers through an interactive method and make sure they have access to the information from Didi. We wanted to target packaging, warnings that are specifically tailored for 18 to 24-year-olds who are the most at risk of cannabis usage. And finally, public transit. Preventing driving under the influence was also key as a continuation of Health Canada's current message, but also just as a general safety feature in the use of cannabis in Canada. All of these educate the consumer on the different adverse effects of cannabis and maintain that cautionary message that Health Canada wants to provide. Overall, this is what the Ask Didi campaign is, la campagne Demande à Didi.
So with the Ask Didi campaign, youth will feel as though they're a part of the conversation, and it will be non-judgmental and engaging. Now with that said, I know going into another conversation with my dad, I'll no longer be the listener, I'll be the lecturer in giving him the many risks associated with cannabis. Thank you so much. We now open the floor to questions.
Great. Okay, I have a question. So first of all, great presentation. You guys obviously put a lot of work into this, and so congratulations. I wanted to know, how did you get the budget costs for public transportation?
All right, so we consulted two advertising firms, or the same advertising firm that gives kind of ranges for advertisement in several cities. So actually we also considered a range. So if we look at bus rates, like the maximum would be in New York, it would be 950, and in a smaller city would be 150. So given that we're looking at Montreal and Toronto, we still didn't want to be like too conservative, so we took an average of 625. The same can be done for the metro. So it ranges from 75 to 150, again, kind of expensive to non-expensive cities, depending on the number of traffic, number of people who see the ads. We took an average of 112.5.
And sorry, you might have mentioned that, but I forget. For how long?
3 months.
3 months?
Both of them for 3 months.
Okay.
And maybe just I'll piggyback on that question. Does this include the cost to actually produce the ad?
Yeah, so this it's not in here, but it's in the $30,000, and like the influencer and production costs, we budgeted $30,000.
Okay, maybe I didn't express myself properly. On the bus,
Yeah.
the actual like thing that we're gonna put
Yeah.
there, you have to produce it somehow.
Yeah.
You have to.
So we have like that. We've included in all production
Okay.
costs. If you believe it is not sufficient, we have, I think, around.
I just wanted to know.
Okay.
Thank you.
And there was a mention about tailoring the bus, like the
Yeah.
per city, per color of city. Wouldn't it make more sense to make sure that you leverage the colors of DD to give more impact on the campaign and recognition?
Yeah, absolutely. So touching on that, my colleague Sarah did develop the poster. We kept it as blank as possible to give the most neutral image. Of course, when I mentioned tailoring to the colors, I'm more referencing to trying to make it like part of the environment in which the person evolves. So in terms of we're using the colors that the cities use, but the hashtag of DD can also be colored. There can be the logo. A little bit like what we did on the packaging for the cannabis could be something that we leverage there as well.
Okay.
I have a question about the influencer strategy. You're going to use two influencers. Do you think that will be enough to reach all the 18-24 Canadians across Canada?
So we would obviously need to look a little bit more into the specific influencers, and again, they might not be willing to participate. So we also have some backup influencers as well that we've just brainstormed. But we could look into a different influencing strategy with more targeted micro influencers, so that we kind of wanted to make sure that we wanted to make sure that it was broad and it attracted as many people as possible, but we also wanted to make it flexible and able to be tailored sort of to different needs within regions.
A follow-up question on the influencer part. So, for you, is that important that a given influencer that you would pick for the campaign is perceived as a cannabis user?
So for us, it was more about the selection criteria to make it relatable. One of the key features that drove us to have influencers is while looking at the Health Canada website, at the very bottom of the not cannabis regulation, but cannabis advice page, I would say, there's two pictures, and there's little stories there as well. They're both parents. They're both parents who have either lost their child, and of course that's a very tragic story. We completely empathize. We're completely empathetic. But also, the role of the campaign was to target an 18 to 25-year-old. So we want to have somebody who's relatable, who's young, who's successful, and who's able to act as an informant, not necessarily as a cannabis user, because that would be promoting the use of cannabis, and that's not necessarily what Health Canada is all about in their message. It's a lot more cautionary. But somebody who has relevance there and who's within the age group is what we were looking after.
I think what's important, the message that's important there is that it doesn't really matter if the influencer is legal or not. This is contextual. It's of actuality that cannabis recently got legalized. So if we were able to get someone to be like, hey, we need to open up a conversation about this, regardless of whether they smoke or not, this is a reality. I think that would help gain a lot more traction and speak a lot more to the people in the 18 to 24 age group.
Thanks.
Maybe then I'll have
I'll
go. As far as influencers go, and I'm going on a limb here, do you think that maybe associating with someone as Olivier Primo, who owns, as we know, like a beach club and it promotes alcohol use, and it's been in the news for great reasons, also very bad reasons in the past, do you think maybe that could taint the great image that Health Canada has right now, and do you think maybe there's a mitigating way for us to approach this?
That's definitely important to consider, and one of the things we did come up with was other influencers. So I mean, there's always opportunity to explore other areas like micro-influencers as well, but the important thing here is just to emphasize the relevance of the public figure, as well as to emphasize them using the technology. So it's really important that they show their interactions with Didi, and this can be anyone who goes on Facebook Messenger that messages with Didi, and it can be nice to see a personalized conversation between us.
If I can rapidly add on, in terms of Olivier Primo, the mitigating effect for the bad, bad news and the negative news in which Beach Club is featured, I would almost argue that being associated with Health Canada and providing those measures to the people who are potentially attending Beach Club is also a completely mitigating factor, because you're encouraging them to use resources at their disposal and not to mix the jugs.
Yeah. Quick question about Didi. So the 80,000 that you've allocated, that is to make it better, if I can say so. What about running it? Does that include the costs of having it run?
So, if you go to the slide about Heyday.
So
we looked into it, and we recommend that obviously Health Canada outsource this project. So we know that you already worked with, was it Banfield? But we also explored other options. There are people on the market right now who can help run these media campaigns, work with ad agencies to provide the staff and the resources needed to be running these. So like Heyday, for example, was a startup that we found in, not a startup, but like a company in Montreal that was specializing in the AI development. And they would be a potential partner, for example, or working within the ecosystem and obviously having it run by a third party. But yeah, the 80,000 would probably be the cost to run it. We were looking on a sort of 6-month time frame. The cost might increase to run it longer, but that would depend on the success of the project.
And have you considered an exit strategy for Didi?
Well, I guess the point here is really to make Didi more complete in order to maybe put it in the store someday so that people can continually keep using the bot to have information on cannabis. And so this is not just a campaign. We want people to actually use Didi in order to have information on cannabis like they would do if they were going to go to the store. And so the beauty of Didi here and the strategy is that it's going to keep always benefiting people. And that's really like what we're trying to hammer home here.
And how many people do you think within 6 months will actually have a chat with Didi?
So right now, the alternatives to go home has had around 21,000 clicks in the first 6 months of the original Didi being launched. With the influencer campaign, we're estimating that we're going to be able to double that at least, because we want to reach people. So the way that we've constructed this strategy is that we'll be able to penetrate the market deeper, generate more clicks, and effectively make Didi a little bit more relevant than it was already, while building on its existing capabilities.
And let's say you're doubling, so you would be around 120,000. Do you believe that is sufficient for the objectives of this campaign? Do you believe that hits the nail?
I think it's sufficient in 6 months to start the conversation. Didi can always improve. It can be put into retailers. It can be put into online retailers as well. But if people start knowing what DD is, or it becomes somewhat of a familiar figure, that can easily take off beyond the 6-month horizon.
And to add on to that, what's important as well is that DD becomes a mascot for the conversation. So even if people aren't using it, if people are aware of it, if it exists, so one of the really quick PSA type things that came to mind was like Smokey the Bear for forest fires in the US. So not on a similar level, but in a way like representing and championing the way and showing that, like Health Canada is making efforts to try to talk to young people in other ways that aren't traditional or that are more tailored towards how they want to be engaged and giving them an opportunity to interact.
And if I can add, also with around $250,000, you'll be able to advertise to 90% of 18 to 24 to Canadians between the age of 18 to 24 on Facebook. And although it's not a certainty that they'll click on the ad, they'll be aware and they'll start thinking about it. And as their friends use it, I mean, it's going to become part of their reality.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Merci beaucoup.
Merci.
Merci.
Merci beaucoup. Merci beaucoup. Merci beaucoup.